The desert sun hung low over the Arizona training base, throwing long, dusty shadows across rows of military vehicles and the echoing clang of metal. Inside a dimly lit armory, the steady rhythm of cloth over steel filled the silence, soft, patient, almost meditative. Maya Collins sat alone at her workbench, wiping carbon residue from a sniper rifle's barrel with a care that bordered on reverence. She wasn't a soldier, not anymore. She wore no uniform patches or rank insignia, only a gray t-shirt streaked with oil and her name stitched faintly above her chest. To most who passed her, she was just the armorer, the woman who made sure their weapons didn't jam, misfire, or explode when they needed them most. But to Maya, each rifle had its own story, its own scars, its own heartbeat. Her world was small, orderly, and quiet. She liked it that way. Outside, laughter erupted from a group of snipers returning from field training. Their voices carried through the open hangar doors, loud and confident, mixing bravado with fatigue. Maya barely looked up. She'd learned long ago that soldiers' conversations were like desert wind, noisy, temporary, and full of sand. She dipped a brush into solvent, cleaned the bolt face, and inspected it under the fluorescent light. Her hands moved with the kind of precision that only years of repetition could build. Every motion was deliberate, from the rotation of her wrist to the placement of each cleaned part on the table. A framed photo rested beside her toolkit, a weathered picture of a man in marine camouflage, smiling beneath a battered cap. The caption on the back, written in fading ink, read, "For when you need to remember where patience lives." Her father's face. Corporal Nathan Collins. He had been a Marine sniper, known for impossible shots and a calm that unnerved even his comrades. Maya had grown up watching him train on the endless plains of Montana, long before she understood what the military really meant. He had taught her how to read wind through the dance of grass, how to feel the distance between breaths, and how to let her mind go still when everything else demanded speed. Those lessons had once made her the best in her unit, until the day she swore never to pick up a rifle again. She pushed the thought aside and focused on the weapon in her hands. A Barrett M82, freshly returned from the range. She could tell the shooter had rushed their shots. The residue was uneven, and the barrel grooves were prematurely worn. Sloppy work. She sighed softly, the faintest trace of disappointment in her expression. Just as she reassembled the rifle, the hangar door creaked wider. The sudden burst of sunlight drew her attention for the first time that morning. A group of men entered, the special sniper unit from Fort Benning that had just arrived for joint training. They carried themselves with the quiet swagger of those who had seen too much and said too little. Their boots echoed against the concrete as they walked, scanning the room, assessing everything and everyone. "Afternoon, ma'am," one of them said with a lazy grin as they passed her bench. She nodded politely, returning to her work. Another voice spoke, lower, steady, commanding. "That the armorer we heard about?" Maya didn't look up, but she could sense the one speaking was different, observant. There was weight in his tone, not arrogance. "Yeah," another replied. "She keeps our toys from falling apart. Doesn't talk much." They laughed lightly, though not cruelly. The commanding voice came closer. Maya sensed him stop behind her. She could feel his eyes studying her workspace, the immaculate order, the labeled trays, the perfect alignment of tools. "Impressive setup," he said. "Most armorers I've met don't run this clean." Still not looking up, Maya replied, "Clean weapons don't kill. Dirty ones do." There was a pause. Then a soft chuckle. Fair enough. When she finally turned, she met the eyes of Sergeant Kyle Mercer, a tall, sun-worn sniper with a scar just above his eyebrow and the kind of posture that came from a lifetime of precision. He wasn't what she expected, less arrogant than the others, more curious. "You've got experience with the M82? He asked, nodding at the rifle on her table. Maya placed the weapon down carefully. Enough to know most people handle it wrong. That earned the grin. "You saying my men are sloppy?" "I'm saying they're too proud to listen." For a moment, silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but charged. Kyle studied her face, trying to read her. She returned the gaze briefly, then went back to work, her tone even. "Your rifles are ready. Make sure your men don't soak the barrels again. Arizona dust will eat them alive." Kyle nodded slowly, amused by her bluntness. "Noted, armorer." He started to turn, then hesitated. "You ever take one of these out yourself? I mean, beyond the cleaning bench?" Her hands stilled. "Once." He raised an eyebrow. "Once?" "Once was enough." Kyle tilted his head, intrigued but sensing the boundary. "Fair. Still, I've seen people spend years on these weapons and never understand them like that." Maya didn't answer. Instead, she picked up another rifle and began disassembling it, her fingers moving in that same deliberate rhythm. Click, twist, release, breathe. It was her language of silence, the one place she still felt in control. As the group left, Kyle lingered by the door. "We'll be on range 7 tomorrow at dawn," he said. "If you ever feel like watching what your work can do from the other side of the scope." Maya didn't look up. "I've seen enough." He smiled faintly, then disappeared into the desert glare. The door shut behind him, leaving her alone again, with the hum of the lights and the smell of oil and gunmetal. Yet something about his words lingered, not because of the invitation, but because of the memory it stirred. That same tone, that same curiosity. She'd heard it once before, years ago, in her father's voice. "Maya," he'd said when she was barely 13, standing behind her as she aimed at a tin can nearly half a mile away. "Don't think about the distance. Don't even think about the trigger. Think about your breath, the space between the seconds. That's where the shot lives." She'd hit it on her second try. He'd laughed, proud but quiet, the way he always was. Now, years later, she realized she hadn't felt that silence, that perfect stillness, since the day they buried him. She placed the cleaned rifle on the rack, her hands lingering on the cool metal a moment longer than usual. Outside, the sun was fading, painting the desert in streaks of orange and red. The sniper's laughter drifted faintly from the barracks, but Maya stayed where she was. She stared at the last weapon on her bench, a long-range rifle she hadn't touched in months. It wasn't part of inventory. It was hers. The barrel bore a faint engraving near the stock. And Colin's, her father's rifle. She brushed away the dust, almost tenderly, and for the first time in years, she didn't just clean the weapon. She held it. Her fingers found the familiar balance, the weight that once felt like an extension of her heartbeat. She inhaled, slow and steady, the way he'd taught her. Outside, the wind began to rise, carrying the dry scent of sand and sagebrush. She didn't know why, but something inside whispered that her days of quiet cleaning were numbered. The stillness before change had come, and she could feel it in the desert air. Morning heat shimmered above the Arizona base like invisible fire. Range 7 stretched toward the horizon, 4 kilometers of dust, cactus, and mirage. Sergeant Kyle Mercer's sniper team prepared for long-range drills, unpacking rifles with the swagger of men who lived for precision. The air buzzed with easy banter and caffeine-fueled arrogance. Inside the armory, Maya Collins finished checking the team's cleaned rifles. She moved with her usual quiet rhythm: cloth, oil, inspection, repetition. Through the open door she could hear laughter, the metallic click of magazines, the occasional shouted joke. She didn't join them. She rarely did. But that morning, Something tugged at her. Curiosity, maybe, or the echo of her father's voice, telling her that silence should never turn into hiding. When she finally walked out to deliver the weapons, the sun caught the edge of her goggles, flashing like a signal. Kyle noticed. "Well, if it isn't the armorer herself," he called, grinning. "Careful, folks. She might start grading your cleaning job." A ripple of laughter followed. Maya set the heavy case on the tailgate of a Humvee and folded her arms. "You'd all fail," she said simply. The men hooted at the comeback. One of them, Private Rendon, young and brash, nudged Kyle. "Bet she's never even pulled a trigger, Sarge." Kyle smirked, curious more than cruel. "That true, Collins? You ever shoot one of these, or just make them pretty for us?" Maya raised an eyebrow. "I shoot when there's a reason." That answer only fueled the teasing. Rendon laughed. "What reason you got out here? Dust mites attacking the base?" Even Kyle chuckled, though there was respect in his eyes. "All right then," he said, pointing toward the far horizon, where a pale white rock jutted from the earth. "That boulder's sitting at about 4,000 meters. Think you could hit it?" The range fell quiet. It was an absurd distance, nearly 2.5 miles. Even professional snipers struggled to land shots that far without perfect conditions, specialized ammo, and luck. Maya followed his gaze. The rock was a shimmering speck, barely visible through the heat waves. 4,000? She repeated softly. Kyle shrugged. "Figure we could use some entertainment." "No shame if you'd rather not." Rendon grinned. "Yeah, no shame in knowing your limits." She could have ignored them. She wanted to. But inside her chest, something stirred. The same quiet fire that had once lived in her father's lessons. "Don't prove them wrong," he used to say. "Prove yourself right." Without a word, she opened the rifle case she'd brought, her father's Barrett M82. The moment she lifted it, conversation stopped. It wasn't military issue. It was custom modified, worn smooth from years of use. The initials NC were faintly engraved near the stock. Kyle's grin faded. "That's not base property." "It's mine," she said. "And it's clean." She dropped to one knee, the movement fluid, almost graceful. Dust rose around her boots. Her mind shifted into the calm she hadn't felt in years, the tunnel where only distance, wind, and breath existed. She extended the bipod, unfolded her small notepad of ballistics tables, and began calculating. Wind, 7 miles per hour, southeast. Temperature, 98 degrees F elevation, 1,800 feet. Humidity, low. Mirage index, unstable. She adjusted for every factor, dialing elevation and windage with tiny, deliberate turns. The men watched, their amusement melting into uneasy fascination. The sound of her slow breathing filled the silence between heartbeats. Kyle crouched beside her. "Need a spotter?" She didn't look up. No. Through the scope, the world shrank. The heat waves danced, the horizon pulsed, and somewhere within that blur sat the pale rock daring her to miss. Maya focused on her breathing, in, hold, out. Her father's voice whispered in memory. The trigger isn't a command. It's a question. You answer with your breath. She exhaled halfway, paused, and squeezed. The rifle roared. The recoil thudded against her shoulder. Dust burst upward around her. The sound rolled across the desert, fading into silence. Every head turned toward the target. Through Kyle's spotting scope, the distant boulder seemed untouched. Then, a faint shimmer, a tiny puff of white. A fragment of rock tumbled away, rolling down the slope. "Holy hell!" someone muttered. Kyle blinked, refocused, then laughed in disbelief. She hit it. Rendon's mouth hung open. That's impossible. Maya stood, brushed dust off her knees, and began packing the rifle. It's math, she said quietly. And patience. No one spoke as she latched the case shut. Even the desert seemed to hold its breath. She looked at Kyle once, not with triumph, but calm acknowledgement, then turned back toward the armory. The men parted instinctively as she passed, like soldiers making way for something they didn't quite understand. Behind her, whispers started, disbelief, awe, pride. But Kyle stayed silent. He watched the shrinking figure of the woman in gray walking through the heat haze, her rifle case balanced easily in one hand. He'd spent years chasing the perfect shot, yet she had done it as if distance were just another detail to clean away. When she disappeared inside the hangar, he finally exhaled. "Gentlemen," he said, voice low, "we just got schooled." Inside the armory, Maya placed the rifle on her bench and sat. Her hands trembled faintly, not from recoil, but from memory. The shot had felt too familiar, too natural. She hadn't planned to prove anything, yet the moment she pulled the trigger, it was as if her father's ghost steadied her hand. She stared at the rifle. Dust still clung to the barrel. Slowly, she reached for a cloth and began cleaning it again, the same ritual as always. But now every motion carried new weight. Through the walls, she could hear the snipers still talking, their voices distant and unsure. Her name was spreading. She could feel it. Soon everyone on base would know about the armorer who hit 4,000 meters. She didn't want that. She wanted her silence back, her routine, her safe distance from the noise of pride and memory. But deep down she knew it was too late. A door had reopened, one she'd locked years ago when the world had taken her father. As she finished reassembling the rifle, she noticed something on the stock. A faint fingerprint burned into the varnish. Not hers, but older, darker. She smiled sadly, whispering, "You would have laughed, Dad." A shadow fell across the doorway. Kyle stood there, holding his cap in his hands, hesitant. "That was some shot," he said quietly. Maya didn't look up. "It was just distance." He stepped closer. "You know, most of us spend our whole careers chasing that kind of control. I've seen snipers lose themselves trying to make a shot half that long." She set the cloth down. "Control isn't something you chase. You hold it or you don't." He smiled faintly. "You talk like someone who's seen both sides of a scope." Her eyes lifted to his. "Maybe I have." Kyle hesitated, wanting to ask more, but something in her gaze, that quiet gravity, told him the conversation was over. He nodded and left, leaving the faint scent of desert dust in his wake. When the door closed, Maya let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The echo of the shot still rang in her chest, steady and haunting. She looked again at the rifle, at the engraved initials, at the life she'd tried so hard to bury beneath steel and silence. Outside, evening shadows stretched across the sand, long and uncertain. She knew tomorrow would bring questions, attention, maybe even opportunities she didn't want. But for now, there was only the quiet hum of the armory and the slow rhythm of her cleaning cloth. Each motion whispered the same truth her father had left her. Precision is peace. And for the first time in years, she felt it, that fragile, fleeting peace that lives in the breath between the pull of a trigger and the sound of a bullet finding its mark. The night after the shot, the base was quiet. Training had ended hours ago, and most soldiers were either asleep or pretending to be. The desert wind whispered against the tin roofs, carrying with it the smell of dust and burned oil. Inside the armory, a single light glowed Maya's. She sat alone at her bench, the same one where she'd spent every evening for the past 3 years. Her hands were still, the cloth untouched, the rifle case unopened. The silence that used to comfort her now pressed down like weight. She had always liked quiet, but tonight the quiet brought ghosts. She closed her eyes. The desert faded. The smell of gun oil was replaced by pine and rain. The sound of wind gave way to the creak of a wooden porch in Montana. And she was 16 again. Her father, Corporal Nathan Collins, sat beside her, his weathered hands guiding hers as they assembled a rifle under the fading orange light of sunset. The wide Montana plains stretched endlessly before them, golden and wild. "Don't rush," he said softly, his voice steady but kind. "A weapon will never respect you if you don't respect it first." "I'm not rushing," she murmured, biting her lip as she tightened a bolt too quickly. He chuckled, a low sound that always calmed her. "You're thinking too loud again, Maya. Stop trying to be perfect. Just breathe." She took a breath. The metal stopped slipping. The rifle came together in her hands with a satisfying click. "There," he said, smiling. "Now, what did I tell you about the trigger?" "That it's not a button," she said automatically. "It's a promise." "Exactly. Never pull it unless you're ready to live with what happens next." She nodded, though she didn't really understand yet. To her, shooting was peace. The sound, the focus, the challenge. But for him, it was something heavier. That evening, he set up a target across the field, a row of cans perched on an old fence post nearly a mile away. The distance shimmered in the summer heat. He handed her the rifle and crouched beside her. "You don't shoot to prove," he said quietly. "You shoot to understand." She adjusted the scope, lined up her sight, and missed her first 3 shots. He didn't scold her. He just said, "The bullet doesn't go where you want it. It goes where you are." It wasn't till her 4th shot, when she finally stopped thinking, that the can toppled cleanly. Her father's hand rested on her shoulder, solid and proud. "Now you're not fighting it. You're part of it." That night, as they packed up, she asked him why he still practiced if he'd already done his duty. He looked out at the endless land, eyes distant. "Because peace doesn't stay, kid. You have to keep aiming for it." Years passed. She grew stronger, sharper, better. He rarely praised her, but when he did, it was with a warmth that lasted for days. She could hit targets her instructors missed. Local hunters called her the ghost mark. But everything changed on a gray October morning. She remembered the knock on the door, 2 Marines standing in the rain, caps in their hands. Her mother collapsed before the officer could finish the sentence. "Maya, I'm sorry. Your father's convoy. Roadside IED. He didn't make it." The words tore through the walls of their home, through her chest, through the quiet world he had built. She didn't cry at first. She cleaned his rifle instead. It was the only thing that still made sense. Every groove she wiped felt like a conversation unfinished. Every fingerprint on the barrel, a story she couldn't let go of. The funeral came days later. Rows of flags, uniformed men, and the echo of rifles firing into the cold air. She stood beside her mother, expression still. The chaplain's voice faded into nothing. When they lowered the coffin, Maya's fingers brushed the folded flag, and that was when she finally broke. Not from grief, but from the silence that followed. That night, she went to the field behind their ranch, the one they used to practice on. She set up his rifle and aimed at nothing but sky. Her hands trembled. "I don't want this," she whispered into the wind. "Not without you." She fired once, the bullet vanishing into the distance, and vowed it would be the last. Years later, that vow still held, until yesterday. The 4,000-meter shot had shattered more than a rock. It had cracked open a wall she'd built around herself. Maya rubbed her eyes and leaned back against the workbench. She could almost hear her father's laugh, that deep, warm sound that always followed her victories. "Guess you're still teaching me, old man," she muttered under her breath. A knock came at the door. It startled her. "Yeah?" Kyle Mercer stepped in, still in uniform, dust on his boots and a hesitant look in his eyes. "Didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't," she said, though she didn't rise. He looked around the armory, his gaze landing on the photo of her father. "That him?" Maya nodded. "Yeah, he's the reason I know what I know." Kyle smiled faintly. "Looks like a Marine." He was. Kyle hesitated before speaking again. "You don't talk about yourself much, Collins. But after today, I've got to ask, where'd you learn to shoot like that?" She looked down at the rifle resting across her lap. "From someone who taught me that shooting isn't about killing. It's about control." He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You really don't like attention, do you?" "No." "Well, you're not going to have a choice. Words already moving fast. Command wants to know who you are." Maya sighed. "I'm nobody special." Kyle smirked. "That's not what 4 kilometers says." She didn't answer, just stared at the rifle case. After a long silence, Kyle straightened. "You know," he said, "a lot of good soldiers forget why they started. You haven't." She met his gaze then, steady and unreadable. "Because forgetting costs more than remembering." He nodded, understanding enough not to ask more. When he left, Maya stayed in the dim light, alone again. But this time, the silence didn't feel suffocating. It felt alive. She reached for her father's photo, tracing the outline of his smile. For years she had tried to hide from the sound of gunfire, from the precision that once defined her. But maybe what she'd been avoiding wasn't the weapon. It was what the weapon represented. Connection. Focus. The part of her that belonged to something beyond fear. She whispered to the empty room. "Maybe peace isn't hiding. Dad, maybe it's finding what still matters." Outside, the desert wind picked up again, rattling the door softly like applause from another world. For the first time in years, Maya smiled. Not wide, not proud, just quiet, steady, and real. Tomorrow would bring questions, attention, and the ghosts of war she tried to forget. But tonight, she let herself remember. Because peace, like her father once said, wasn't a place or a silence. It was a breath between 2 storms, and she had just learned to breathe again. By dawn, the story had already spread. It moved faster than any order, faster than any convoy. A single impossible shot, a bullet that cut through 4,000 meters of desert air, had turned into legend before the sun even rose. The base cafeteria buzzed louder than usual that morning. Soldiers huddled over half-eaten breakfasts, replaying the tale in a dozen different versions. "She did it with a standard M2010, one said. "No way, had to be custom optics. 4,000 meters? That's nearly 2.5 miles, man. You'd have to account for curvature, wind, humidity, even the Earth's rotation." And somewhere in that swirl of disbelief and excitement, her name always came up, Collins. But Maya didn't hear any of it. She was already awake before dawn, as usual, cleaning rifles in the quiet of the armory. She preferred the solitude. The world was easier to understand when reduced to mechanics and steel. She had no idea that outside those walls, she was quickly becoming something else. A story. At 0700, Sergeant Kyle Mercer walked in with a grin that said he'd already heard more than enough. "Morning, Collins," he greeted, dropping a tray of ammo belts on the table. She nodded without looking up. "You're early." "So are you," he replied, sitting on the edge of the workbench. "Guess neither of us likes sleep." She didn't respond, still focused on a rifle scope, her hands steady. Kyle watched her for a moment before chuckling. "You know you broke a few brains yesterday, right?" I think half the guys spent the night arguing about how the hell you did it. Then they wasted a night, she said flatly. He smirked. You really don't like attention, do you? Attention doesn't reload magazines. Kyle laughed, but then his tone softened. Command wants to see you, Maya. That made her pause. Command? Yeah, Colonel Reeves. Apparently, you've become his morning headline. She frowned. I didn't do anything wrong. That's what makes it worse, Kyle said with a grin. You did something right. And in this place, that's more dangerous. The colonel's office was on the far side of the base. Clean walls, blinds half drawn, and the faint smell of coffee and sand. Colonel Reeves was a man in his 50s, with the sharpness of someone who had seen too much and still expected more. He didn't waste time with greetings. At ease, Specialist Collins. She stood straight, hands behind her back, eyes steady but cautious. I've been briefed on your demonstration, he began. 4,000 meters. Confirmed by multiple witnesses. That accurate? Yes, sir. He studied her. You're not much for boasting, are you? No, sir. Good. The military already has enough loud heroes. We need quiet ones. He stood, pacing slowly behind his desk. You understand the significance of what you did? That's a world-class shot. Hell, only a handful of people have ever documented a confirmed hit at that range. I didn't plan it, sir. It was just a test. He nodded thoughtfully. You've got a steady hand and nerves like glass. We could use that. Her brow furrowed. Use it, sir? Reeves handed her a folder. Advanced Sniper Training Program. It's selective. Most candidates wash out in the first week. But your record, your precision scores, your discipline, they stand out. I want you in. Maya hesitated. With respect, sir, I'm not looking for promotion. I'm an armorer. That's all. Reeves smiled faintly. That's the thing about talent, Collins. It doesn't care what you're looking for. He tapped the folder. Think it over. You'll report to Captain Dyer if you accept. She runs the sniper unit. Then his tone softened slightly. And Collins, whatever your reasons, that shot will be remembered. Don't hide from that. Outside, the sunlight hit her like a wave. She squinted, the folder still in her hands. Her boots sank slightly in the dust as she walked back toward the armory. She didn't like this, the attention, the orders, the sudden shift. She had joined the army to disappear, to find structure where life had once been chaos. She didn't want to stand out. But now, that anonymity was gone. She flipped open the folder. Inside were details. Advanced marksmanship modules, ballistic calculations, training in high-angle engagements, wind correction. Words that once felt familiar, comforting even. But now they seemed heavy. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. You don't shoot to prove. You shoot to understand. Was this understanding? Or was it the beginning of losing herself again? That night, the whispers grew louder. She walked past barracks, where groups of soldiers laughed and talked, their voices drifting through the open doors. Hey, that's her, the one who made the shot. Seriously? She doesn't look like much. Guess looks don't shoot bullets. Maya kept walking, expression blank. She'd learned long ago that silence was its own armor. When she reached the armory, she found Kyle waiting, leaning against the doorway with a bottle of electrolyte drink. You okay? He asked. I'm fine. You don't look fine. You look like someone handed you a medal and you're trying to figure out where to bury it. She sighed and dropped the folder on the workbench. They want me in sniper school. Kyle whistled. That's a big deal, Maya. People spend years trying to get in. I didn't ask for it. Sometimes life picks you. She gave him a sideways glance. You sound like a fortune cookie." He smiled. "A wise fortune cookie." Then, after a pause, he added, "You're scared you'll lose yourself again, aren't you?" She froze. He had hit the mark she hadn't spoken aloud. "I'm not scared," she said finally. "Just tired of starting over." Kyle nodded. "Maybe this isn't starting over. Maybe it's picking up where you left off." She didn't answer, just sat down and began disassembling a rifle piece by piece, the rhythm soothing her. After a long silence, Kyle said quietly, "Your dad would have been proud?" Her hands stopped. "You don't know him." "No," he said softly. "But I know what he taught you. And I've seen the way you shoot. That's not skill. That's legacy." Maya swallowed hard, blinking against the sudden sting behind her eyes. "Legacy doesn't change the past." "No," Kyle said, standing. "But it might change what comes next." He left her with that thought. When the lights went out across the base that night, Maya stayed behind. The desert wind whistled through the cracks, brushing her hair against her cheek. She stared at the sniper school application in front of her. She didn't sign it. Not yet. Instead, she reached for her father's photo again. "You always said peace doesn't stay," she whispered. "Maybe this time I'll chase it." Her hand trembled once, then steadied. The next morning, she walked into Colonel Reeves's office and placed the signed form on his desk. "I'll do it, sir." Reeves smiled, not triumphantly, but knowingly. "Good. Report to the sniper range at 0500. Welcome to a new kind of war, Collins." Outside, the sun was just rising. The base looked the same. Dust, metal, an endless horizon. But something inside her had shifted. For the first time in years, she wasn't hiding behind the sound of cleaning guns. She was walking toward the echo of something she once feared, her father's shadow, her own talent, and the storm waiting beyond that target line. And as the morning wind carried the first rays of light over the range, Maya Collins squared her shoulders, ready for whatever came next. Because this time, she wasn't aiming to escape the past. She was aiming to understand it. The desert air before dawn was a knife against the skin, sharp, dry, and cold enough to make even the most seasoned soldiers flinch. But Maya Collins stood motionless, rifle case slung over her shoulder, as the horizon bled from indigo to gold. 500 hours. The beginning of sniper school. Around her, 10 other soldiers waited, some tall and broad, others lean and wiry, each with the same hardened stare that came from years of training and combat. Maya felt their eyes on her, weighing, questioning. To them, she was the miracle shot, a legend made overnight. But to her, she was still just a mechanic who happened to pull a trigger. A sharp whistle sliced the silence. Captain Dyer approached from the range, tall, sharp-jawed, and every bit as unrelenting as her reputation suggested. She wore no smile, no softness. Her voice carried like steel. "Listen up, candidates. I don't care what you've done, where you've been, or what shot you made before you got here. You're nothing until I say otherwise." Her gaze swept the line, stopping briefly on Maya. "Especially you, Collins." Maya didn't flinch. "Yes, ma'am." Dyer smirked faintly. "Good. Let's see if your reputation can survive gravity." The first week was brutal. The course wasn't just about shooting. It was about breaking the soldier until all that remained was patience, discipline, and instinct. Candidates were dropped into the desert with minimal supplies, expected to navigate 10 miles of rugged terrain before sunrise. Half of them didn't make it in time. Those who did were given a rifle, a single round, and told to hit a 1-inch target from 1,000 meters in 40-knot winds. Maya didn't complain. She never did. While others cursed under their breath or collapsed from exhaustion, she moved with quiet precision, adjusting for wind drift, elevation, and mirage like she was solving a puzzle. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. Her bullet hit center. Good grouping, Captain Dyer said dryly, looking through binoculars. Maybe that miracle shot wasn't a fluke after all. Maya didn't respond. She just reloaded and prepared for the next target. By the third week, cracks began to show, not in her aim, but in the people around her. One recruit, Sergeant Diaz, made his disdain no secret. He was loud, competitive, and furious that a woman, and a quiet one at that, was outperforming him. During breaks, he'd mutter just loud enough for others to hear. Probably some lucky shot. Doesn't belong here. Guess cleaning guns doesn't prepare you for the real thing. Maya ignored him at first. But one afternoon on the range, he took it too far. They were paired for a spotter-shooter exercise, simulating coordinated long-distance fire. Diaz deliberately gave her wrong range calls, minor, subtle, enough to throw her shots off target. When she realized, she didn't call him out. She simply adjusted silently, recalculated in her head, and hit the mark anyway. Diaz's jaw clenched. "You think you're better than the rest of us?" She met his glare evenly. "No, I just don't quit." Before he could reply, Captain Dyer's voice cut through. "Collins, Diaz." "My office, now." Inside the command tent, Dyer crossed her arms. "You two have a problem?" "No, ma'am," Maya said quickly. "Yes, ma'am," Diaz countered. "She's disrespectful." Dyer arched an eyebrow. "Funny, I didn't hear her speak once." Diaz's jaw worked. "She doesn't belong here." There was silence, heavy and long. Then Dyer stepped forward, her tone cold. "You know what doesn't belong here, Sergeant? Excuses. Collins may be quiet, but she's earning her place. You? You're talking your way out of it." Diaz opened his mouth, then closed it. Dyer turned to Maya. "Collins, you're not here to be liked. You're here to be precise. Don't let noise distract you." "Yes, ma'am." When Maya left the tent, Diaz didn't look at her, but she could feel his anger trailing her like heat. That night, under a thin slice of moonlight, Maya sat alone at the edge of the training grounds. She cleaned her rifle methodically, her mind drifting. Every bolt she turned, every smudge she wiped, took her back to Montana, to the porch, the scent of gun oil, her father's calm voice. "You don't shoot to prove. You shoot to understand." She whispered it under her breath. "I'm trying, Dad." A soft crunch of boots behind her made her turn. Captain Dyer stood there, hands in her jacket pockets. "You're steady," she said. "Almost too steady." Maya blinked. "Ma'am?" Dyer sat beside her, surprising her. "You hold everything in. No mistakes, no words, no anger. That kind of control is useful in a sniper, but dangerous in a person." Maya hesitated. "Control keeps me focused." "Maybe," Dyer said, "but it also keeps you human. Don't lose that." For a moment, they just sat in silence. Two soldiers bound by distance neither could name. Then Dyer added quietly, "You've got something most people don't. You're not chasing glory. You're chasing peace. That's what makes you lethal." Maya didn't know what to say. She just nodded, and Dyer rose to leave. Before walking away, she added, "You're leading the final test next week. You and Diaz, don't fail me." The final test, the Crucible, was designed to strip away everything but instinct. 2 days, no sleep. Simulated combat zones. Unpredictable weather. One mission objective: eliminate 3 moving targets over a 4-mile range. When they were dropped in the field, Diaz refused to speak to her. Fine by her. She worked faster alone anyway. They crawled through the dust, camouflaged in ghillie suits, moving inch by inch toward position. The heat shimmered like a mirage. Hours passed. Her stomach growled, her hands trembled from dehydration, but her focus stayed razor-sharp. Through the scope, she watched the wind dance across the sand, shifting mirage lines. The target moved, a drone-mounted mannequin barely visible in the haze. She calculated in her head, wind 7.4 knots east, humidity low, temperature rising. Adjust elevation +2. Breath in. Half exhale. Trigger, slow, deliberate. Crack. The drone spun, hit dead center. Even Diaz went still. You actually focus, she said calmly. 2 more. They worked in tense silence, but when the final target fell, even Diaz couldn't hide his awe. When the extraction helicopter came, he muttered grudgingly, "You're good, Collins." She smiled faintly. "You're not so bad yourself." At graduation, only 4 soldiers remained. Captain Dyer stood before them, clipboard in hand. "You've all earned this. But one of you set a new record, longest confirmed hit in training history. Collins." Maya blinked, caught off guard as the others clapped. Dyer's voice softened. "You didn't just hit a target, Specialist. You reminded this unit what patience looks like." Maya didn't beam or brag. She just nodded. "Thank you, ma'am." Later, as the ceremony ended, Kyle appeared, grinning ear to ear. "I knew you'd do it." She laughed quietly. "You sound surprised." "Not at all. Just proud." He handed her a small, folded paper. "Thought you'd want this." She unfolded it, a photo of her father in uniform, smiling beside a young Maya, holding her first rifle. Kyle said softly, "Found it in the personnel archive. Figured it belonged with you." Maya stared at it, her throat tight. "Thank you." He smiled. "What now, Collins?" She looked toward the horizon, where the desert stretched endlessly. The same land that once swallowed her grief now seemed to open a path forward. "I don't know," she said quietly. "But for the first time, I'm not afraid to find out." The wind picked up, carrying sand and sunlight together, brushing her hair across her face. She tucked the photo into her pocket, her expression calm, her eyes steady, not the quiet mechanic she once was, but a soldier reborn through patience, pain, and precision. And as she walked away from the range, one truth followed her like the echo of a distant shot. Peace, she finally understood, wasn't silence. It was purpose. The helicopter blades cut through the night like thunder. Dust and debris swirled around as Maya crouched beside Kyle in the open cargo bay, her rifle cradled across her chest. The red lights inside the cabin pulsed against their faces, painting them in silent tension. Their first mission, Operation Dawnveil. After months of training, precision drills, and emotional battles, this was where everything became real, where the range ended and war began. ETA 3 minutes. The pilot's voice barked through the headset. Kyle glanced at her. "You ready?" Maya's jaw tightened slightly. "Doesn't matter if I am. We're going anyway." He grinned, despite the weight in the air. "That's the spirit." She checked her scope one last time. Clean, calibrated, zeroed for the elevation she'd memorized from briefing maps. Their mission was clear. Provide overwatch for a ground unit, extracting an informant from a remote village near the border. Intelligence suggested insurgents were armed and entrenched. It was supposed to be a low-profile escort, until the word sniper appeared in the intel notes. The helicopter descended behind a ridge. Dust stormed around them as boots hit the ground. The desert stretched ahead, vast, pale under a thin moon. Maya and Kyle hiked up the incline to find a vantage point overlooking the village. From their perch, the small cluster of mud brick buildings looked almost peaceful, lanterns flickering, dogs barking faintly in the distance. Kyle unfolded the tripod and set up the spotting scope. Wind 5 knots from the west. Humidity low. Visibility's good. Maya lay prone, adjusting her rifle. Target zone's 1,200 meters out. Too far for small arms. We're clear. Copy that, Kyle murmured. Ground teams moving. Through her scope, she saw them. 6 soldiers moving like shadows between walls, their formation tight. She tracked them silently, heart steady. For the first 30 minutes, everything went smooth. Then, movement. A flash in the upper window of a distant house. Window, northeast corner, she whispered. 3-story structure, top floor. Possible scope reflection. Kyle adjusted his optics. Confirmed. Looks like a rifle barrel. Range? 1182 meters. Wind shift? Still west minor. She exhaled slowly, aligning her sight. Through her scope, she saw the faint silhouette of a man adjusting a weapon. The pattern was too familiar to mistake. Sniper, she murmured. You have a shot? Yes, Kyle hesitated. Command said no lethal engagement unless confirmed threat. Maya's finger hovered over the trigger. Her breath came slow, deliberate. The enemy shifted slightly, revealing more of the weapon. She thought of her father's words. Never pull it unless you're ready to live with what happens next. For a moment, she saw not a target, but a human, nervous, unaware, maybe just as scared. Collins? Kyle's voice cut through her hesitation. Do we engage? The man raised his rifle toward the ground team. She didn't think. She knew. Crack. The sound was swallowed by wind. The target fell backward, motionless. Target down, she said quietly. The radio crackled. Captain Dyer's voice. Overwatch, confirmed shot. Confirmed, Kyle responded. Hostile sniper neutralized. A pause. Then, good work. You may have just saved them. Maya didn't answer. She just watched through the scope, staring at the still figure in the window, the one she had erased. Hours later, when they returned to base, the adrenaline had faded into something heavier. The others celebrated. They called it a clean mission. No losses, successful extraction. But in Maya's mind, the desert wind still carried the echo of that single shot. In the quiet of the barracks, she sat on her bunk, disassembling her rifle with the same careful rhythm she always had. Kyle entered, holding 2 mugs of coffee. You're still awake, he said, offering one. She took it wordlessly. He sat across from her. You did what you had to. She looked up at him, her voice calm but distant. You ever wonder what happens after? After what? After we take the shot. The people we hit, what they were thinking. What they believed they were fighting for. Kyle hesitated. It's not our job to wonder. It's to protect. She nodded slowly, though her eyes stayed distant. I used to believe that made it easier. He studied her for a moment, then leaned forward. You know what makes you different, Collins? You care. That's not weakness. It's what keeps you human. She gave a small, humorless laugh. Funny, out here, humanity feels like a liability. Kyle smiled softly. Maybe, but it's also what keeps the trigger from owning you. She stared at him, the words sinking deep. Outside, thunder rolled far in the distance. Not a storm, but the sound of another unit's artillery training. The desert never slept. The following day, she was summoned to Colonel Reeves's office again. He stood behind his desk, hands clasped, expression unreadable. Sit, Collins? She did. I read the mission report. 1 confirmed kill, 0 friendly casualties. Good work. Thank you, sir. He studied her. But I also read your psychological debrief. Her stomach tightened. You hesitated, he said simply. She didn't deny it. Yes, sir. Why? Because I saw a person, not a target. Reeves nodded slowly. That's not wrong. But hesitation in the wrong moment can cost lives. I know, sir. Then let me ask you, if you had to take that shot again, would you? The room went still. Maya's voice came out low. Yes, but I'd still hate it. Reeves regarded her for a long moment before sighing. Then you might just be the best sniper I've ever seen. She blinked. Sir, the ones who love it too much, they don't last. But the ones who respect the cost, they're the ones who make the right call. He leaned forward. You've got instinct, discipline, and restraint. That's rare. Captain Dyer's recommending you for long-range team command. Command? Congratulations, Staff Sergeant Collins. That night, Maya stood outside the armory under a sky thick with stars. The desert stretched silent before her, endless, merciless, and beautiful. She ran her fingers over the rifle slung across her back, the same weapon that had given her purpose and stolen pieces of her peace. Kyle approached quietly, hands in his pockets. Heard the news, he said. Sergeant now, huh? Guess so, she said softly. He looked out at the horizon. You ever think about leaving? Every day. He smiled. Then why stay? She was quiet for a long time before answering. Because someone has to be the one who doesn't miss. The one who waits, who chooses carefully. He nodded. And because of your dad? She smiled faintly. Maybe because of him, but also because of me. They stood there in silence, two soldiers in the middle of nowhere, watching dawn begin to rise, a thin ribbon of gold spreading across a sleeping land. For once, the light didn't feel harsh. It felt like forgiveness. Maya whispered to herself, almost too quietly for him to hear, the trigger is still a promise. I just learned how to keep it. The desert sun beat down mercilessly, the sand stretching like an endless ocean. Maya Collins crouched behind a low ridge, scanning the terrain through her scope. Her team, 3 snipers, 1 spotter, and 2 ground operatives, moved silently beneath her watchful eye. This mission was different from training or Overwatch drills. Intelligence suggested insurgent movement in a narrow canyon ahead. Command wanted eyes, not engagement, but Maya knew the reality. In these operations, targets didn't wait politely for confirmation. Team Alpha, status? She whispered into her radio. Moving, Kyle's calm voice answered. Eyes sharp. Maya's hands rested on her rifle, each finger tuned to the rhythm of breath and calculation. Years of practice, training, and personal loss had taught her one undeniable truth. Patience was survival. They reached a high vantage point overlooking the canyon. The sun glared off rocks, creating dangerous mirages. Maya scanned the terrain, noting every shadow, every ripple in the sand. Target movement? She asked Kyle. Minimal, he replied. But I've got heat signatures moving in a tight formation. 3 men, armed, moving fast. Maya adjusted the scope. The figures were small but distinct, insurgents carrying rifles, approaching a choke point. She calculated distance, wind, and elevation silently. Engage only if necessary, she reminded her team. We are Overwatch. Eyes first. Her team nodded, every one of them aware of the weight behind that instruction. Minutes later, chaos erupted. A sudden volley of fire ripped across the canyon. Dust and sand exploded around the ground operatives, forcing them to scatter. Maya's team was pinned behind the ridge as tracer rounds arced dangerously close. Contact! Kyle yelled. Snipers taking fire from the east ridge. Maya's mind went into overdrive. Her training demanded calculation, precision, and calm, even when adrenaline screamed to panic. She identified the shooters, their positions, and potential collateral zones. One insurgent raised a rifle to target their extraction vehicle. Without thinking, Maya calculated a shot at nearly 1,600 meters, a distance most snipers would hesitate to attempt. She adjusted for wind, heat, and mirage. One finger hovered over the trigger. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. The trigger is a promise. Only pull it if you can live with what happens next. She exhaled slowly, letting the desert's rhythm guide her. The scope lined up. Crack. The insurgent went down before he could fire. The canyon erupted into confusion. Her team returned fire, and with her coordination, they neutralized the immediate threat. But the danger wasn't over. From the west ridge, another insurgent squad appeared, flanking their position. Maya assessed options: engage, reposition, or risk losing her team. She noticed a narrow ravine leading to partial cover. "Move! Follow my lead!" she ordered. Her voice was calm, but commanding. No hesitation, no uncertainty. Her team moved swiftly, relying on her calculations and guidance. Bullets ricocheted dangerously close, sending clouds of sand into their path. She kept her head low, eyes through the scope, identifying every movement, every shadow. When a sniper tried to target Kyle, Maya fired. Another insurgent went down. The team's panic diminished with each precise shot she executed. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Her team finally reached the ravine, but Maya noticed a child peering from a nearby rock outcrop, frightened and frozen. One insurgent, using the child as cover, raised his rifle. Maya's heart tightened. This was the test she had dreaded. Precision wasn't just about distance anymore. It was about judgment. Moral clarity. Restraint. Hold fire, she whispered to Kyle. Wait. The insurgent moved, but slowly. Maya calculated trajectory, timing, and wind, but she could not pull the trigger. The child's safety overrode everything else. She whispered a quiet command. Kyle, distract him. I'll take the safe shot. Kyle nodded. Using his scope, he created a diversion, a subtle noise that drew the insurgent's attention. In the split second, Maya fired a non-lethal round, hitting the insurgent in the arm and knocking him prone without endangering the child. The team moved past, and the extraction vehicle arrived moments later, whisking everyone to safety. Back at base, the debriefing was intense. Command praised her tactical skill, precision, and judgment. Yet Maya couldn't shake the weight of what could have gone wrong. You handled that like a seasoned veteran, Captain Dyer said, her tone carrying both admiration and gravity. You didn't just hit targets, you protected lives. Maya's voice was quiet. We survived because we were careful. We had to be. Kyle put a hand on her shoulder. You were incredible out there. I've never seen someone keep calm like that under fire. She exhaled, letting the tension drain slowly. She felt the familiar pull of exhaustion, adrenaline, and relief, but also something new, understanding. For the first time, she truly grasped what her father meant. The trigger wasn't just a weapon's release. It was a decision that carried the weight of life itself. That night, Maya returned to her barracks, rifle cleaned and stored, photo of her father in hand. She sat alone, staring at the ceiling. The shot had been necessary, precise, controlled, but it had also reminded her of the human cost. She traced the edges of the photo with a finger and whispered, not every shot should be taken, but the right one can save everything. Outside, the desert wind carried the faint echo of gunfire from training ranges, mingling with the distant hum of machinery. Maya closed her eyes, breathing deeply. She had survived the ambush, guided her team, protected innocence, and understood the true meaning of restraint. Tomorrow would bring more missions, more decisions, and more weight on her shoulders. But tonight, she let herself rest. She had faced the chaos of the battlefield and emerged with more than skill. She had emerged with clarity, moral strength, and the quiet knowledge that her father's lessons were never just about shooting. They were about life, responsibility, and the courage to make impossible choices. The morning sun rose over the desert base, golden and harsh, casting long shadows across the training grounds. Maya Collins walked toward the range, rifle slung across her back, her boots crunching against the sand. Today wasn't a test, but a demonstration, and everyone knew it. Command had requested a live demonstration for visiting Allied officers, journalists, and even a few high-ranking officials. Maya had been chosen to lead. She didn't feel pride, she felt focus. Calm, steady, deliberate. This wasn't about glory. It was about showing what a disciplined soldier could achieve without losing sight of responsibility. The crowd gathered behind the safety barricades, murmuring with anticipation. They had heard whispers about her. The woman who had hit an impossible target, survived the ambush, and guided her team with unparalleled calm. Some were skeptical. Some were impressed. Maya set up her rifle and scope, double-checked the calibration, and scanned the range. Targets had been placed at varying distances, stationary, moving, and partially concealed. Each one was a test of everything she had learned: precision, patience, and judgment. Kyle stood beside her as spotter, quietly relaying wind speed, elevation, and mirage conditions. They worked together with the fluid understanding of years, though it had only been months. "Begin," Captain Dyer's voice called out. Maya exhaled and tracked the first target, a small metal silhouette 800 meters away. She adjusted for the slight crosswind, measured the distance, and squeezed the trigger. Crack! The target toppled cleanly. The crowd murmured in approval. Next, a moving target, a mechanical figure designed to simulate a hostile combatant. Maya calculated its trajectory, factoring in speed, wind, and elevation. She waited for the perfect moment. Crack! Another hit. Dead center. A third, partially hidden target required more calculation. She adjusted her angle, compensated for a slight heat mirage, and fired. Crack! Another bullseye. By the fourth shot, whispers had turned into applause. Even skeptical officers nodded in recognition. Kyle leaned close. "You're setting records," he murmured. She didn't smile. She just checked the next target. "It's not about records," she said quietly. "It's about understanding the shot." After the demonstration, the officials approached. Colonel Reeves stepped forward first. "Specialist, no, Staff Sergeant Collins," he corrected, smiling. "You've shown what precision, patience, and discipline can achieve. But more importantly," he paused, letting the words sink in, "you've shown restraint, judgment, leadership, qualities far rarer than skill alone." Maya nodded, quiet. "Thank you, sir." An allied officer from another country extended his hand. "I've read reports, but seeing it, you are remarkable. Your team's survival, your decision-making under fire, this is the kind of soldier every army dreams of." She shook his hand, keeping her expression calm. "It's not about dreams. It's about duty." Later, in the privacy of the armory, Maya cleaned her rifle, her hands moving with familiar rhythm. Kyle leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You could have basked in all that attention," he said. "Instead, you came here." She shrugged. "Cleaning guns keeps me grounded. One misstep in focus, and the weapon owns you. Same with the battlefield. Same with life." He smiled faintly. "You've changed things here, you know. People talk about you, not just the shots, but how you think, how you lead." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "I didn't come here to be remembered. Maybe you weren't, but you will be." Weeks later, Maya's team received an official commendation for Operation Dawn Veil. Her leadership had prevented casualties, neutralized threats, and demonstrated a level of judgment rarely seen in the field. During the ceremony, as she accepted the medal, she thought of her father. His voice echoed in her mind, steady and calm. You don't shoot to prove. You shoot to understand. And the bullet is a promise. She traced the edge of the medal with her thumb. Every curve, every engraving reminded her of years of training, loss, and restraint. She hadn't just become a sniper. She had become someone who could carry the weight of life and death without letting it break her. That evening, she returned to her barracks, exhausted but at peace. The desert wind whispered outside the window, carrying the scent of dust and distant rain. Maya sat with her rifle beside her and the photo of her father tucked in her pocket. She spoke softly, almost to herself. I hope I made you proud. Outside, Kyle waited, leaning against the wall. You did, Collins. More than you know. She looked at him and allowed a small, genuine smile, the first in a long time. This isn't the end, she said. There will always be another mission, another shot, but maybe now I understand what it's all for. He nodded. Understanding makes all the difference. Maya picked up her rifle, cleaning cloth in hand, and began her evening ritual. Each motion was deliberate, precise, reflective. Not for the medal, not for fame, not even for duty, for peace. Months passed. Maya's story spread quietly through the ranks and beyond. She was no longer just the soldier who had hit the impossible 4,000-meter shot. She became the sniper who balanced skill with humanity, precision with judgment, and leadership with compassion. Her team respected her, even those who had once doubted her. Younger recruits studied her methods, learning that mastery was as much about patience and restraint as it was about aim. And somewhere, deep in the silence of her barracks, she allowed herself to feel the full measure of what she had become. Not a legend of distance or speed, but of responsibility, focus, and integrity. One quiet night, standing atop the ridge overlooking the desert, Maya fired a single round at a distant steel target. The bullet flew cleanly, perfectly aligned, and hit center. She exhaled, letting the weight leave her shoulders. The desert wind carried the echo, stretching across miles like a whisper to the past. This is the promise kept. The shot understood. The legacy earned. And in that moment, Maya Collins finally smiled fully, at peace with her past, her present, and the life she had chosen. The life she had earned, one careful, deliberate shot at a time.